Hello, everyone. In this case of the month, we're going to see a controversial case. Actually, the diagnosis is a little bit controversial because the problems in the diagnosis hasn't resolved yet. But I'll try to explain some parts of some interesting and phenomenal features of this tumor. So this is a 56-year-old female, and she had a mass excised 26 years ago at the dorsum of foot, and she said that this mass appeared after a bee stick and diagnosed as a lipoma, and now she admitted to our hospital for an enlargement at this area and with the pain. So let's see the case, and as we see here, we have this lipocyte or adipocyte rich lesion with some vascularity, and we have some hemosiderin accumulation and at the low power, and we have some areas of hypercellularity and some other areas of myxoid change and more hypercellularity and more myxoid change. And actually this is the whole lesion, and when we go high power field, we see some vessels with inflammatory change, and here hemosiderin deposits are prominent. Again, we don't see any we don't see too much malignant looking cells, but all we have is the fat and these vessels with hemosiderin. But in some other areas we also see hemosiderin in the spindle, bland looking spindle cells, and some other vessels seems to be damaged, and as you see here, fibrin accumulation seen in the wall of the vessels, and here again vessels show some kind of damage, and some of them really resemble pleomorphic hyalinizing angiectatic tumor, and these areas are consistent with hemosiderotic fibrolipomatous tumor. But as I told you and showed you in the low power field, we have some areas with increased cellularity, and as we see here, these ugly looking hyperchromatic cells just appeared in the cellular areas, and some more hypercellular areas here, and with accompanying hyperchromatic cells. And these hyperchromatic cells, they are not binucleated. They don't look like Reed-Sternberg cell. And the other interesting feature of this tumor here again another hypercellular part. Actually, the hyperchromatic ugly looking cells do not represent any virocyte or Reed-Sternberg like cell, that might give a diagnosis of myxoinflammatory fibrosarcoma or fibroblastic tumor. The other interesting part of this case, it was the presence of myxoid areas. Let me find, and it's always hard to find these kind of things during the video microscopy. And here we have a small part. Some of the cells do have the inclusion, internuclear inclusion, as you see here. And these myxoid areas, at least some of them contain lipoblasts-like cells. Yeah, here we go. We have a cell-like multivacuolated cytoplasm. Another one is here. And these lipoblasts-like cells are also, they are not compatible with diagnosis of HLFT, I mean hemosiderotic fibrolipomatous tumor, and it is also not diagnostic for myxoinflammatory fibroblastic sarcoma. So this tumor, this is another slide, and this is almost the same. As you see here, we have more areas of myxoid change. It looks like myxofibrosarcoma. These areas resemble myxofibrosarcoma, and the other areas resemble more like fibroblastic sarcoma, but there is no feature of the pleomorphic hyaline-angiectatic tumor, but the surrounding fat tissue has the morphologic features of hemosiderotic fibrolipomatous tumor. And this is, the whole thing is positive for CD34, as we see here. And while S100 is and cytokeratins are negative. So just quick review of the findings. As we see here, some lipoblasts in the myxoid areas and some hypercellular areas with hyperchromatic looking, ugly looking cells resembling pleomorphic sarcoma or myxofibrosarcoma, and CD34 is positive. And here is the internuclear inclusions. So the diagnosis is hemosiderotic fibrolipomatous tumor with progression to myxoid sarcoma, ACA, hybrid HFLT, MIFS. To explain it, hemosiderotic fibroblastic tumor and myxoinflammatory fibroblastic sarcoma. So there is a very comprehensive review on this by Boland and Fall. And the features of the fibrolipomatous tumor is they have myxoid infiltrative uniform spindle cells with the pigmentation also within the spindle cells, and they share some features with pleomorphic hyalinizing angiectatic tumors with intranuclear inclusions. They have these damaged vessels resembling again the pleomorphic hyalinizing angiectatic tumors, and the pleomorphic hyalinizing angiectatic tumor may have these hemosiderotic fibrolipomatous tumor-like areas surrounding the tumor, but in the fat we have these thrombosed and hyalinized vessels more prominent than HFLT. And we also see some pleomorphic cells, but not that much as we see in our case. And myxoinflammatory fibroblastic sarcoma has a multinodular infiltrative areas with some pseudo-lipoblasts, just as in our case, and inflammation also accompanies that. Those ugly-looking cells look like Rich-Steinberg cells, and so the problem is coming from fat and HFLT has been shown to be related by Fulp and Weiss at 2004, but the question mark is about the relation of HFLT with myxoinflammatory fibroblastic sarcoma. So when we look in molecular findings, TGF-BR3 and MGA5 rearrangements are seen many of hemocytic fibrolipomatous tumors, and also many cases of hybrid HFLT and fat cases. But pure fat cases doesn't contain any rearrangement. More interestingly, myxoinflammatory fibroblastic sarcomas are reported to have this gene rearrangement less frequent, like 20%. And then so-called hybrid HFLT and MIFS tumors are also featured by these rearrangements. So there is a question: is it a hybrid tumor or a progression to myxoid sarcoma? There are, of course, this is a controversial topic, but we can say that lots of large series does not mention any hemocytic fibrolipomatous tumor around or surrounding this tumor, and even after the molecular findings, it is seen very infrequently. So it could be a progression of HFLT because like myxoinflammatory fibroblastic sarcoma, myxoid architecture and presence of pleomorphism and pseudolipoblasts are present, but unlike the myxoinflammatory fibroblastic sarcoma, there are no Rich-Steinberg-like cells, which is very diagnostic for the MIFS, but doesn't seen in our hybrid cases. So we are unable to call as like hybrid MIFS component, but we have the myxofibrosarcoma like vessels. So this is again a table from that review, and it might help when you try to diagnose this kind of cases. And this is a differential diagnosis with key morphological features. Thank you for your attendance, and see you in next month. Thank you.